kind of like an out of body once in a lifetime experience to have your revenue shut off overnight. I lived in New York City. I had mortgaged my home, leveraged everything that I owned. And if Barry's Chelsea didn't work, I would have probably been like homeless and single.
What's up, folks? Have you ever been a customer of a product or service and then said, you know what, I'm going to be the CEO of this one day? Well, that is exactly what today's guest, Joey Gonzalez, did. I'm Will Ahmed. I'm the host of the Whoop podcast. We're on a mission to unlock human performance. And with this conversation, I'm sitting down with Joey Gonzalez to talk about the building of Barry's, which is a phenomenal boutique fitness experience, really one of the OG fitness experiences. And it goes from one class to now being in 18 different countries, over 80 different locations. We talk about that entrepreneurship journey. We talk about his approach to health and fitness, what it takes to build, by the way, a really great health and fitness experience. We go into all the challenges of Barry's during COVID, what it was like to shrink the organization dramatically, fire a lot of people. That was really hard. And then we talk more about what the future is for Joey and Barry. So this is the Whoop podcast. Let's get after it. It's going to be a great episode. Thank you. Okay, Joey, welcome to the Whoop podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What an amazing story you've got building Barry's the way it's grown.
Yeah, it has been quite a journey.
Let's go back just before Barry's even. Like, where were you growing up? Where were you in life?
So I grew up in the Midwest, a small town outside Chicago in Illinois. And my parents both immigrated to the U.S. My dad from Cuba through Spain. He went to medical school in Spain and then ended up practicing in Chicago. And my mom moved to Chicago directly from Naples, Italy. And so first generation American, and very much felt that growing up because there was no one else like me in many ways. So, just grew up in a very homogenous part of the country and always knew and felt really different from the people around me. I'd say in a lot of ways, like my experiences as a child helped sort of prepare me for a life filled with like challenge, rejection, etc. And when you learn how to handle adversity at such a young age, it really sort of gives you almost like you're a step ahead of people, to a certain extent. And I loved performing arts growing up, which was also very different because most of the kids around me were in athletics, and finally started to like go out and audition for things when I was around 13 years old and ended up landing a professional show downtown Chicago and got into SAG and started doing film, TV, musical theater, all of that until 17 when I moved to LA to continue to pursue that and study film and theater at USC. Graduated SC, fell out of love with acting, in love with Barry's, and the rest is Barry's history.
You mentioned growing up with some adversity, which I do think is a very helpful preview to building companies and the entrepreneurial spirit that goes with it. What kind of adversity did you face growing up?
Well, I was, I'm gay, Latino, growing up, surrounded by, white, heterosexual people who, children, when something's different, I think their go-to is just to make fun of it, like if they don't understand it. And so whether it was people, laughing and saying, your dad cuts my grass, or, people, calling me derogatory terms around sexuality, I seemed to be faced with adversity one way or another. It was coming at me in all different directions. And that, was really challenging. But at the same time, I look around at individuals I've known my whole life who didn't have that experience and just feel, I don't know, like they haven't been as prepared for life and what it has to offer. All the surprises, all the adversity, right? Like when you start to sort of navigate that at a young age, I think it just breeds resilience.
Yeah, it's definitely true that having gone through challenging periods, especially at a young age, can help form your resilience growing up.
Yep.
And if I look at your kind of overall story, it looks like there was probably some challenging moments. Certainly, you've described at a young age, but even I imagine that period of going from wanting to be, it sounds like an actor, right, at one point, to then choosing a path in fitness.
Yeah. And there was kind of a lot in between there of, different careers that I tried on for
Start, stop.
size. Yeah. I was, whether it was a real estate salesperson, I was a massage therapist at some point. I waited tables, obviously, like everyone else in Los Angeles. So I tried a lot of different things on, but knew what it was like to love what I did and for work not to feel like work, because I grew up, acting, doing what I loved. So just kept searching for something that would fill my cup in the same way. And I discovered Barry's as a client. People call me CEO founder, but I always say I didn't start the business, but I certainly found it. And it was a very sort of undiscovered hole in the wall that had all of the charm and incredible sort of cult following it has today, but just in a micro way.
What's the signal to you've got a job that's not the right job for you?
Just not looking forward to work.
Yeah.
Not looking forward to Monday is different than not looking forward to work, because even if you love your work, sometimes the end of a weekend or vacation is tough. But I feel like once I'm there on Monday, even, I'm just so excited to be there. So I think if you find yourself feeling like you're just not happy in your workspace,
Would
it's
you
not the right
would you
place.
kind of like, you'd quickly realize that and move on?
Yeah.
Like you didn't linger,
No, but I'm like a high risk, high reward guy.
cut bait.
Always.
Yeah.
And I think most people in the world, like most of the people I grew up with, are still living in the suburbs of, Chicago,
Yeah.
doing what they're supposed to do. And that just was never
They never got
my
off
thing.
the path.
Yeah.
Describe the first time you did a Barry's workout.
Whew. So I was actually terrified of berries for like a year and a half or two, because I just heard how hard it was. And this was back in the day when it actually was really hard. Now berries is structured in a way that, like, regardless of your athletic prowess, you can get through a class. Like, we're very accommodating for different kind of levels of fitness. But back then it was like, if you weren't sprinting at 10 miles an hour, Barry or one of the coaches would come and like turn your treadmill up to 10 miles an hour or faster. And so it was very challenging. If you weren't doing what he said, he kicked you out of the room. It was hard. It was very hard. It took me time to kind of work up the courage to go there. And when I finally did, I was really surprised at how incredibly like receptive and warm both the staff, the trainer, and all the people around me. I think that was actually what really got me to buy in, was like the people next to my left and right on the treadmills helping me figure things out, just the camaraderie that existed, as well as the accountability, right? Because that's the thing about a Barry's class is people compare it a lot to the workout you do at the gym, because a lot of people will go to the gym and they'll do their cardio and they'll do their strength, but you're only willing to push yourself so hard, even if you have a personal trainer. But when you're at Barry's and you have that, trainer that's watching you and your speeds and your weights, and in addition, people to your left and right that are doing exactly the same thing, you just get competitive, and it just gets you to a different level. So that's what got me hooked, was really the people and the experience. And then just as I started to attend, I was never much of an athlete, but Barry's transitioned me into one. I became a runner, fell in love with weightlifting. And it was so rewarding for me to be able to kind of track like my speeds. My sprints were getting faster, and the weights I picked, on an arms day were getting bigger. And so it was great.
So it kind of became the gateway for you to get fit in these other disciplines as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think when you practice that level of discipline in one thing, it most certainly like spills in across.
You've now done a bunch of classes
Yeah.
and you want like a job there.
So, I mean, yeah, in my fantasy, I was taking 2 a day often. And so Barry obviously knew who I was. And one night we were all out at like a dinner, and he said, "Joey, do you want to start teaching?" And I was like, "Yes." That's how Barry talks. By
Like
the
an
way.
impersonation, by the way.
It's-
Your
it's-
acting just came to life. That was like a nice moment, by the way.
Thanks. I've got more. And I was like, absolutely, I, would love that, because I was starting to fall in love with fitness. I missed performing. And that's one thing that is so, I think, necessary when you're a Barry's trainer, is that you're able not only to put a well-programmed, efficient workout with smooth choreography that makes sense, but also that you can perform, right? You're a DJ, you're making jokes, you're making people feel a certain way. You have to be evocative, and you have to like know how to control a room and use your voice. And so all of the skills that I had kind of developed up until that point really lent themselves to me putting that mic on and teaching my first class.
Were you nervous the first time?
I was so nervous because it was this was back in the day when not only was Barry's very hard, there was no training program for any
Yeah,
employee.
it's like,
So you
here's your
just
first.
jumped in. And of course, I knew a guy, Rich Vaughn, who was my first trainer at Barry's, and he called me on a Friday night and was like, I have something tomorrow morning I can't teach. And it was Saturday at 10 a.m. And anyone in fitness, in boutique fitness, knows that's the time. That's the day. Like Saturday 10 a.m. sells out anywhere. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
no matter
right.
who's teaching it. And so I was like, yeah, I raised my hand right away. I was like, I'll do it. You know, what do I do? He's like, oh, you'll be fine. Just play music and teach the class. So I showed up and pretty good at multitasking. So I think that helped me because with Barry's, you're sort of guiding people on treadmill through runs while you're guiding them through floor exercises, doing strength training. And you have to track time for both of them at the same time. I know you've done class before,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
just
yeah.
for your
No, but
listeners and
it's
viewers.
helpful to describe it.
Yeah. And so being able to multitask, I think helped me. And I loved music. And I think the background in performance, because I had done musical theater, et cetera, helped me sort of like figure out beat drops and when people should be sprinting, et cetera. So it all kind of came together. And I'm sure for me, I felt like it was great. I'm sure if I took that class today, I'd be like, that was so bad. But I thought it was a strong start.
We're going to talk about the build up to becoming CEO, but if you go into a class today to kind of test out, how an instructor's doing, first of all, just describe the experience of Barry's, but then also touch upon what are the things that you look for that's a sign that, hey, this class is going well.
So it's a great question because we actually have started something specifically over the past 2 years called the WOW Initiative,
Hmm.
where, as we've scaled the business and grown and we have so many more studios and trainers than we used to have, quality control is really top of mind for us. And really figuring out how to equip our trainers with not only the onboarding and the training, but the tools to be able to deliver what we call a WOW class is the biggest priority for us as an organization. When I take class, what I'm looking for is obviously programming that makes sense, right? Are they adhering to the guardrails that we provide them? And so take, for example, like a Wednesday, chest, back, and abs. You're basically supposed to be doing 40% of chest, 40% of back, right? Opposing muscle groups, and then 20% abs. So abs are, half as much as the other two because we do abs pretty much every day at Barry's.
Right.
So that's just like one example of I'll be sort of clocking how much time I'm spending on each muscle group and then figure out by equation after class whether or not they follow that programming. And there are many other examples I can give you. Like we're supposed to repeat patterns on the treadmill. There are just certain things, guardrails that are provided for them from a programming standpoint. So adherence to that is like one of the things I pay attention to. The second is musicality, which for me is like make it or break it, right? If I'm on the treadmill and I'm sprinting while one song is ending and another's beginning, it like ruins it for me. So that's like an example of a like, oh God,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
are you thinking?
And I think
How
it's
did that
probably
happen?
that's probably one of those things like for the person who's doing the sprint, it makes for like a 20% worse experience, but they have trouble putting their finger on it. Whereas for
Totally.
you,
It's clear.
it's like, oh my God, like
Yes.
it's the hair in the soup kind of
Yep.
moment for a chef, right?
Yep. That's right. And then the last piece after musicality is performance. So just engagement of the instructor with the class. By the way, that sometimes it doesn't for me, but for some people that trumps all.
Mm.
If you have a
Their
really
relationship with the
if you have a really engaging instructors, we've had instructors who are so successful at Barry's who excel in that third piece, but can't quite nail the first and second. And it's just because people will forgive someone that they adore and love, So that part can't really overestimate how important it is.
From a control standpoint, how much is the instructor driving every moment of the class, like when the music changes beats and all these things, versus a lot of this is just pre-programmed and they're trying to keep it on the rails?
No, nothing's pre-programmed. We do have like a 30, 60, 90 onboarding. I think it's like first 50 class or 60 days. I forget exactly what the rule is, where they're teaching classes from a bank.
Hmm.
But that's just for like onboarding purposes, once you're Barry's instructor, it's 100% original content. So when you step into a class at 9 a.m. and you take a button legs class at 9 a.m., if you were to stay and do a double and take the 10:15, completely different playlist, all different exercises. Instead of, two 12-minute rounds, you might do like 3 7-minute rounds. So it just depends on who you're taking, essentially. And they have complete creative control over their class.
Will you take classes from other types of companies like Orange Theory or, fill in the blank, these different types of studios? Like, is there any aspect of that for you as inspiration or not?
Um,
Like, I buy a ton of tech products, right? I'm constantly looking at little things that companies do and
yeah.
deciding whether it's right for us or not.
So innovation is one of our values, and we most definitely harness that. I don't think it has a huge impact on the final product that we're offering because we very rarely change, like, as an example, the days of the week. Like, our clients love that they know what day to expect no matter where they are in the world, right? So we've had this same sort of structure in place for, I think, 7 years now. We've had the same days of the week.
So
But
Barry's
what
on a Tuesday, wherever you go is Barry's on a
That's right,
Tuesday.
is button legs. But
Yeah,
what we do innovate is kind of like our training systems, the tools that we provide. That's, I think, where we spend most of our time innovating. We've always been a sort of back to basics workout routine. Like, you know what you're going to get. It's almost like having a personal trainer, but it's half the cost and it's in a group setting. And
right.
that's Barry's. There have been so many trends over the course of my career. I've been doing this now 20 years this year. There have been working out in the heat, working out in the cold, working out only your butt for an hour. Like, there's have been so many trends that have come and gone that if I had adopted all of those, I don't know where we'd be today. And that's not to say we wouldn't be even better than where we are, but I think it's core to who we are to just be back to basics and give people exactly what they know they're going to get.
Well, the idea of not following trends is a brilliant observation or strategy. I mean, Whoop wouldn't be here today if we tried to mimic a lot of what had happened in the wearables industry because most of the wearables industry has gone away and it's just consolidated around very few players. So
Yeah.
I definitely respect this sort of notion of what makes berries berries is sort of that core essence and maybe different from what other folks are doing. That's certainly how I've tried to build Whoop.
Yeah. No, that's smart. And that's actually a great example of like wearables, right? So Orange Theory came along and started, that's like an integrated part of the experience, right? Is
Right.
that heart rate monitor. And so there was pressure on us, I guess, to start to think about doing that as well. But our approach was really like, we'd rather partner with great brands like yours
Yeah.
and give our clients who want that experience the opportunity to have that experience in a really premium way than all of a sudden start to integrate like hardware into the workout. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just,
Totally.
yeah, we know what we're
And
good at and
and
we'll
it is
stick to
worth
that.
saying we are now partners. So,
Yes.
you can find Barry's within the Whoop app. If you sign up for Whoop through Barry's, you get a discount and all sorts of special perks. And we did that because we really like the clientele that you all have as a business. And we'd also seen people logging what probably was Barry's, but just as a different activity type. And we always want to create the most, I think, comprehensive experience for
Yeah,
our members.
that's awesome. Well, it's been great.
Yeah. So 2004, you're in the instructor phase.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the progression from there.
Yeah. So, you know, my I've had to work really hard, which unfortunately is something that I think is going out of style these days.
I know we
Um,
can talk about that.
it's
Hell,
really, it's very disappointing to see, but like I was given when I started as an instructor, despite my level of engagement and how excited I was, and the quality of product I think that I was able to deliver right away, I was giving really bad classes. And I think there were probably around, most of the classes I was given had like around 5 to 8 people that were showing up on average, which for me meant $25 for the hour. And so I was told by my managers, like, listen, if you build it, like you'll make more, right? Because we're able to earn a bonus on attendance. And so I hustled so hard, and within 3, maybe 4 months, those classes were filled. And I had, like, 32 people. It was selling out. And then I was able to, like, you know, earn more classes, and, shortly
What
thereafter,
did you do in that phase to get more people to come to the classes?
I was and this was before social media, which has made, in my opinion, has made it a lot easier to connect with people. I would, like, ask everybody to put, I'd keep an email list,
Yeah,
like,
right.
at
Yeah.
class, and I'd be like, "Can you give me your email?" Like,
Yeah,
write it
right.
down with this pen and
Yeah, right,
paper.
right, right. Totally.
And I would email people, and I would invite them. Like, I'd host brunches on Sunday at the Abbey and just, like,
Yeah,
invite all
legit.
my clients to hang out, and would just really try to, like, foster community, and then also be genuinely invested in people, like, know who they are and their kids are and who their dog is in the lobby, like, really pay attention. Um,
Was that a
and
phase in your life in which you had a bunch of other things going on, or it was all berries?
so doing I was working at a hospitality, a hotel in corporate sales at the time, and I kept that job. I can't remember. It was probably, like, for 6 to 12 months while I was an instructor, maybe like 6 months. Then I heard the GM role was opening up, and so I really wanted to interview for it. And it took the previous GM time to leave, and so I went out and got a job at, again, just an example of how I was, like, hustling,
Hustle, yeah.
at Gold's Gym, Hollywood, which is the worst job of my life. And I've had some bad jobs. And this was just, like, really challenging. You are just, they teach you to turn them and burn them and just sign people up and hopefully don't show up. And, it
Oh
just
my
was, like,
god.
very aggressive sales environment.
Yeah.
I was out at, like, Runyon Canyon handing out, like, free passes. So, like, I just was able to get some experience under my belt so that when the job became available, I could say, like, "Look, I've been working sales at Gold's, blah, blah. I have a lot to offer for this role." And it ended up working. I was there probably, like, 3 months before she finally left. And when I interviewed for the job, I showed up with, a list of ideas of how berries could really sort of augment and expand the sales. Like, they didn't even have memberships at the time.
Hmm.
And so me, someone who's going twice a day, was like, it'd be really great to reward frequency by giving membership. So implemented a lot of new ideas as I sort of took on the management role.
Did you go into that GM role being like, "I'm definitely getting this"? Like, what was your mindset?
Yeah, I think so. I felt pretty confident about it. I think for me, it was like, I think because of my decade of acting, I'm always cautiously optimistic. You know what I mean? Like, I show up, um, hoping for the best, but also prepared for the worst. So if I feel like in that time when I was interviewing, I probably thought, if I don't get it now, I'll get it later. Like, I'm an eternal optimist as well. So
Hmm.
if I had gotten a call that I didn't get it, I would have kept being a trainer and kept, trying to become a manager. And I would have
And
done it
eventually you
eventually.
would have gotten
Yeah.
the management role.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find these stories around, executive growth or entrepreneurship. It's like they sort of have two flavors. One is like the one step at a time, heads down. Oh, wow, look where I woke up, like after all these steps. And the other is like, no, I'm going to be CEO of this one day, and I'm just going to have to drive towards that. And it feels like you were a little bit more the former, but correct me if I'm wrong. Like
100%.
you didn't,
Me
you
being
didn't.
CEO was never
It wasn't like, yeah,
never even a thought.
right,
Like, that was not something I was after. But I'm not title driven,
yeah.
so I just really wanted to be a partner. Like, I wanted to invest. I had money from acting and had invested in some real estate, and so I wanted to invest what I could in this business,
Mhm.
and be an equity participant. That to me was the goal. And I set that goal by the time I was 30. I was supposed to achieve it, and I didn't.
But that's a good
So
ambitious goal too.
yeah, yeah.
Like you kept creating these high marks for yourself.
Mhm.
And I love the story about Gold's Gym. I mean, that strikes as it must have been hard for you. Like, you strike me as someone who's pretty high integrity when it comes to health and fitness
Yeah,
and,
I
like
was not very good at
yeah,
it.
but
Selling
also
people on.
there's a lack of alignment too, right?
Yeah,
Of, like, how you feel health and fitness should be done and then what you're trying to sell to someone, which is churn
completely.
and burn.
completely. And Barry's is the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Like we need our people to keep showing up. Like we spend so much time thinking about how to keep our clients engaged and retaining them.
So you become general manager.
Yep.
How long does that last?
That happened probably like 2005, and immediately I start like, so I have friends visiting me from Chicago, from other cities, from other countries even. And obviously every time they come, we go to Barry's. And this is when Facebook starts to become popular. And all I kept hearing from everyone was that this would work where I live. And the original John and Rachel Mumford and were the investors in Barry's. So that was sort of the trio, the original threesome. And I would ask them over and over again, like, can I invest? Like I'm not asking for sweat equity. I will invest everything I have. I'll move around to different parts of the country and I'll prove the portability of this service. And it was just a no, time and time again. It was kind of more like we'll think about it. And then I never got an answer. And then finally, 2008, I just gave them an ultimatum. And I was like, it's been, over 3 years that I've been working here. I'm either going to do this with you or without, but I'd much rather do it with you. And that was sort of what immediately got them to say, like, okay,
That's a powerful kind of moment in time when you look back on it that way. I mean, what made you say it's now or never in 2008?
It was really instinctually just like, I can't expect them and this answer to change. And so to be honest with you, I was like prepared to leave that day.
Yeah, right.
Because I went into the meeting thinking it was going to be we'll think about it again. And I was going to quit.
And then you were going to create your own version of
I
Barry's.
had the whole business plan, the brand, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the brand?
It was called Raw, Running and Weights.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good name too.
I know. I think so.
Yeah. I like that.
I don't think I've ever shared that.
Well, breaking news here. Yeah, hopefully you trademarked it. I don't think you need to.
It's available.
I think Barry's is fine.
Yeah, I think we're doing okay.
You're doing okay. So that's like 2008.
Yep.
It's another 7 years until you're CEO. So what's happening along the way?
So 2009, I opened my first studio where I was sort of an equity participant in San Diego. Then I moved across the country to continue to do that in New York. I remember thinking I'd be back to LA in like 6 months, the same way I was in San Diego. And I ended up being there 5 years because the business, that's when Barry's like truly took off. Barry's Chelsea was a completely different model than anything we'd ever seen before. And I had a lot of input into how we sort of changed the experience, the build out, everything. We added locker rooms and showers. We'd never had that before. We had, premium amenities partners. We added Fuel Bar, and my husband and I, he's a chef, owns restaurants in Southern California and very healthy chef. And so we came up with these high protein, non-dairy shakes that were
that's awesome,
amazing. And our clients love them. And so just changed the whole experience in Chelsea. And I remember we thought the business would be paid back in 3 months, and it was paid back in in 3 years, and it was paid back in 7 months. And so we were making by month 3, we were making what we thought we'd make in year 3. So huge success. And so I opened, Tribeca and NoHo and the Hamptons and, continued to sort of expand that business.
In 2008, before this expansion, how many studios were there?
2.
Okay, so
just West Hollywood, and then there was a small one in Sherman Oaks.
So then fast forward 2 or 3 years, and how many?
Well, in 2008 there were 2, and then I'd say by 2013 we were around like 10 probably.
So you got moving.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's when started to sort of, so Barry's, important to say, we haven't even talked about this, but Barry's was the original. He started the company in 1998 when boutique fitness didn't exist, right? So it was relatively easy for us to open markets. The challenge was always like, how do you explain the value to a consumer? Because they're used to paying $99 down the street at the gym for a month. And now we're asking them to pay at the time 20, right? 25, whatever it might've been, per class. that was the challenging part, but there was no competition, which made it easy. So you had this whole segment of the population that was engaged with this type of experience, and you were the only option. Fast forward to, 2012, very crowded landscape. So Soul Cycles popped up, Flywheels popped up. There's so many different concepts all around town. It was around that time that I started to talk to my partners about raising money through private equity. Because up until then, we had grown organically. We had some like American Express merchant loans,
Yeah, right.
but other than that, it was all just reinvesting what we made, and got them on board. I think probably it took a few weeks, but like I think they were in a later stage of life as well. So being able to monetize was like a very attractive idea for them. So we all kind of aligned and went through the whole process and ended up picking North Castle Partners, and that deal was done in 2015. And part of North Castle's request was that I stepped into the global CEO role. But to be honest with you, I had really been doing that.
You've been doing
My
that
role
job.
didn't change at all day to day. So
Your
we
title
even
kind of just
we did
changed.
town halls where we went
Yeah.
around to different cities introducing me as the CEO, and people were like, "I thought you were the CEO." They had no idea. So not much changed for me, but
What's the change from the vantage point of taking on capital? I think a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes wonder, should I bootstrap this for a while? Should I raise capital? How did it change for you with capital partners?
so full transparency, I think I have a unique private equity story. My partners are some of my closest friends. Like they've become part of my family and have been so supportive in the hardest of times,
Mm,
and always put like culture before anything else. So I've had a really positive experience. They also were brought to the table a level of professionalism and experience that I didn't have in my former partners. Again, my partners were incredibly creative and founded this amazing thing, right? But it's different. The sort of like qualities you have as a founder getting a business off the ground, and what makes you successful doing that is very different than what helps you scale a business to 50 units, as you know.
yeah.
So it was great to have like I think partners that could really add value and help me grow HQ, which up until that point I didn't have. So now all of a sudden I had head of marketing, I had it just head of real estate. It was kind of unbelievable.
Yeah, I bet. What's up, folks? If you are enjoying this podcast or if you care about health, performance, fitness, you may really enjoy getting a Whoop. That's right. You can check out Whoop at whoop.com. It measures everything around sleep, recovery, strain, and you can now sign up for free for 30 days. So you'll literally get the high performance wearable in the mail for free. You get to try it for 30 days, see whether you want to be a member. And that is just at whoop.com. Back to the guests.
Yeah.
So then let's fast forward to say 2000 and end of 2019. How big is Barry's at that stage? How many studios?
Oh gosh, 2019. We were probably around 50 to 60 studios total.
Well, the lead in here is okay, COVID.
Yeah.
Like, talk about hard times. I can't think of harder times than for fitness studios and gyms.
Yeah, COVID was, I think, obviously the hardest time of my professional life. I should say that like I lived in New York City. I had mortgaged my home, leveraged everything that I owned, and if Barry's Chelsea didn't work, I would have probably been like homeless and single, like I
Yeah.
had just risked everything. And I was working probably 20-hour days, and it still didn't even touch COVID, like how challenging COVID was for me personally. It, it was, it's kind of like an out of body once in a lifetime experience to have your revenue shut off overnight. Typically, that's as a result of like, you know, bad decision making or a recession or something that you see coming at least. This was just a total blindside for us.
Well, and then in scenario planning, maybe you'll look at, classes are going to be down 20%. What would
Exactly.
that do to our
Yeah.
business and our exposure? Oh, classes are up 20%. What are they? Like, you don't scenario plan zero.
There was no business case
There's
study for
there's
this.
no historical
No,
precedent of zero.
no. And in fact, HBS ended up writing a case study on berries through COVID,
Oh, cool.
probably just to memorialize like what companies like this had to do, right? Because it's unprecedented. And I actually remember my parents used to always say that our generation was just so spoiled and life was so easy and wonderful and we have no idea what it was like when there were wars and etc. And I remember one day she said to me, she's like, Joey, this,
Let's
this strong
go.
Italian
Let's go.
accent. She's like, we've never been through anything like this. I'm so sorry. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, I don't even know what you're gonna do. It's just
Yeah.
like such a dismal conversation. But obviously nice to have that empathy. And speaking of empathy, I think that there was like a life-changing moment for me personally, because what was happening, right? There was nothing I could do to change it. But the way that I kind of perceive the world and my thought world, that is under my control. And I was just in so much pain, like going from 1,400 employees to 300. Like there's just a lot of trauma in
Yeah.
that, especially if you're like an empathetic person. And I remember listening to a meditation that challenged, unrelated to what I was going through, but just fell into my lap at the right time, challenged me to not be empathetic, but to be compassionate instead. It was on leadership. And it just like clicked for me. I remember the meditation had you like picture driving past an animal that had been hit by a car and was dying, and put yourself in the body of that animal and feel the pain and blah, blah. And you go through this whole like experience meditating. And then they had you redo it being compassionate, where you're just looking at it saying, I feel bad for that animal. And that really helped me get through the next like year of my life, because even though I still felt everything, it was at a different level. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Like
totally. I mean, there's a huge difference between acknowledging that someone's dealing with pain, and absorbing
feeling
that
it for
pain
them. Yeah.
yourself or trying to feel it for them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how many painful conversations there were going from 1,400 to 300 people.
Yeah. And just so many decisions, where you just don't know if you're doing the right thing, and you'll never know. I still don't know, but you just allow. For us, it was really like, we're a very mission, vision, values driven company. And so for us, that was like what we always had on the table as we were sort of coming together as a leadership team and making decisions.
What were a few memories you have of that period? Like, what was the first moment you're like, "Oh, wait, like, this is like we're gonna shut down."
For me, we just kept hearing it would be 2 weeks. And I told you
Yeah,
earlier, I'm an eternal optimist. So
yeah,
for me, I remember pulling the trigger on shutting all the studios down. We did it before there were mandates, just because we wanted to be responsible and do the right thing. And I remember thinking like,
So this is probably early April 2020?
yeah,
Okay.
maybe even, I think it was in March even.
Yeah.
I thought like it would definitely be 2 weeks, maybe less. You know what I mean? 'Cause of that optimism. So that was like the first thought in my head. Like, this is going to be okay. Everything will be all right. Like, we'll be back to normal. Yeah. We weren't. But again, I think all of my sort of lived experiences as a child, knowing how to process adversity, also not like anchoring myself in, because then you think about like all that you've accomplished and achieved. We haven't even talked about like personal wealth, right? So like here I was thinking I had built this company that had a certain value, and then overnight it's worth nothing. In fact,
Unbelievable.
it's just piling on debt, right?
Yeah,
just to
it's like
just
negative
to
value.
stay in existence.
Yeah.
And that was another great lesson for me, is that like I've never anchored myself in that. And so that wasn't as traumatizing for me as a lot of people, right?
Well,
And
that's
that
a
was
really good observation as an entrepreneur or a leader. Like, I know for me in the early days of building Whoop, I really, assigned my value as like a human being to the success of the company.
Right.
And if Whoop was having a good day, I was having a good day. If Whoop was having a bad day, I was having a bad day. If Whoop was failing, I was failing. And it's a super unhealthy mindset for building a business.
Yeah.
And it's also not true. Like to your point about, I mean, Barry's during COVID is one of the great examples of it not being true. You shutting down all these studios had nothing to do with how you were running Barry's,
Yeah.
right? And so it sounds like you had accumulated some resilience and wealth of knowledge over the course of building the company or your youth that put you in a position to be able to manage that moment.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of people who tie their professional success up with their own self identity, when a moment like that happens, it tears you down.
Yeah. For sure.
So, coming out of COVID, then, did all of a sudden it just feel like, wow, I had been running with like 100-pound backpack and now the wind's at my back
Yeah,
and
I wish there was like a moment where it felt like I
yeah,
threw that backpack off, but there wasn't. There
yeah.
were, I think, a lot of like mini celebrations where like business would really start to spike again, and then all of a sudden Delta, right? And then like attendance would be down dramatically, and then business would start to pick up again, and then Omicron, was it? Yeah, was next. And so it just felt like even today, like I'm looking over my shoulder, and we've been like up and to the right since I'd say like end of 22, early 23.
Well, there is this funny element of like all the industries that were thought to be dead forever during COVID are now having these huge renaissances.
Oh
Like
yeah.
like the cruise industry is like crushing.
Hmm.
Do you remember when people said like there'll never be a cruise again?
I do. Yeah.
And it was kind of easy to believe in the darkest moments of COVID. Like, yeah, why would anyone go on a cruise? But I feel like fitness experiences are under that umbrella
Yeah,
of like
for sure.
yeah, I don't want to spend my whole life in my home. I don't want to work from home and then work out at home. And then, I want to get out and experience something. And if I go to this class and it's high energy and I've got a great instructor and I'm around other people, it's endorphins, like da 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 da.
Yep. Yeah, I think every piece of press I did during COVID started with some journalist asking if I thought group fitness was over forever. And it always felt like such a myopic question because
I always thought that was insane.
this is like so. Are you serious?
Well,
Like
I remember someone saying to me that because I signed a huge lease in the dead of COVID, the building that we're recording this in.
Yeah,
And this was a time when the whole tech industry was like, oh,
work
we're
from
going to be on
home.
Zoom
Yeah,
forever. It's so great. Like, we're going to save all this money. And I was like, that is not an environment I want to build a business in.
yeah,
Like, that's just not the life I plan to live in. And I knew I'd gotten to a crazy echo chamber because there was an investor of ours who said, I actually think that human beings are going to be done shaking hands.
wow,
And it really crystallized for me just how there was a meaningful percentage of society that thought that like we were just going to change as humans
yeah,
like forever. And I remember that comment like it was yesterday because I thought that was one of the craziest comments I'd ever heard.
yeah,
And this was like a really brilliant person.
yeah. A lot of people were saying that.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it feels good to be on the other side of it and be
Yeah.
hugging people
Oh
and
my god, for
kissing
sure.
people on the cheek and whatnot,
Yeah.
but doing human things. So today, Barry's over 80 studios. How many countries now?
15 now.
Do you find yourself just on a plane all the time, or do you get to soak it up?
I travel a lot. I'm
Yeah.
probably gone 40% of the time. I probably travel like a week and a half, at least a month, but I love it. You know, people think because I've been doing this so long that I'm like ready to do something else, but I love it so much. It's like my firstborn, I'm still so connected to, I still teach classes when I travel. I'm still, you know, very involved in like finding, recruiting talent, interviewing talent, and taking classes. And I, it's definitely still fills my cup.
Here's some fun stats just on berries. I'm curious if this will resonate for you. So average heart rate 133 beats per minute. The zone distribution, zone 1 So that'd be like 50 to 60% of your max heart rate and so forth upwards here. So 12% people spend in zone one, 23% zone two, 27% zone three, 24% zone four, and 8% zone five. So, you're spending like 35% of your time in zone four and five. That's pretty intense. And then not to mention you're probably the times that where maybe you're dropping into a lower heart rate zone. It might be when you're doing the weights, for example.
Yeah, probably. That's from our clients?
This is from Whoop data
Got it.
because we have a lot of, let's see, 1.8% of our members have logged a berries activity
Oh, wow.
this year.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
It's the fourth highest activity in terms of time spent in zone five.
Wow. And
Losing
zone
out,
5 is what heart rate?
that's 90 to 100% of your max.
Okay.
And but it's all out. Like if
Yeah.
you're at 90 to 100% of your max heart rate, like you're really straining.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
What's next for you? Like, how do you think about the next steps in building berries? Is the goal to have 800 studios? Is it more about the experience just being pristine? Like,
Yeah, I think so. Right now we have 3 different products in market. We have our traditional run lift class, which is a combination of interval running with the strength training piece. We also launched something about 10 or 11 years ago called Lift, which doesn't have any cardio. It's 50 straight minutes of strength training. And our clients who either do cardio elsewhere or have injuries, right, love Lift. And we have, I think, 15 of those studios globally. And it's actually our number one utilized product in market because it's lower capacity. So they sell out really quickly. And then the last concept we have is Ride Lift, which is similar to our original concept. We just replaced the treadmills with bikes. So it's like a low impact alternative. And that's the most recent. We just opened Chelsea like a year and a half ago. We just opened West Hollywood. So when we think about, I think, the future of berries, there's really a lot of white space that exists for our, original concept in new markets. As example, like just signed Charleston, Salt Lake City. We're looking at markets like Columbus, Ohio. So continuing to expand that concept into new markets, as well as infilling in other markets where we already exist. So we just opened Santa Monica. We're opening Studio City, both in Los Angeles. Just signed a lease for Williamsburg, Hoboken. So still a lot of like continued growth in cities, dense urban markets where we already exist. And then separately, there's this kind of white space story for the other 2 modalities, which are, I think, really gaining in popularity and attention.
amazing.
So, yeah, I think the goal is to have 200 of the original concept within the next like 5 years, to have 200 of those in the US. And we're still kind of like thinking through the growth strategy for the other 2.
Fascinating. What's your fitness routine? You look like a super fit guy.
I do berries 4 or 5 times a week, and it's really my cardio. So my Whoop has been helping a lot because I try to keep my heart rate between a certain range. So
Okay,
I'll like
good.
have my phone open and watch my heart rate as I do my cardio. And then I weight lift 6 days a week.
Okay. In addition to the berries
Yeah.
class.
Yep.
You kind of just do weightlifting alone, know what you're going to do, or do you have a trainer or?
I actually work with a bodybuilding coach who mostly lays out nutrition for me, but also will send like fun ways to kind of switch up the workout routine as well.
What role does nutrition play in bodybuilding?
Oh my God, it's huge. It's massive. The amount of protein that I have to ingest on a daily level is crazy. And protein's actually really hard to find. So when you're stuck like at the airport and you didn't like pre-pack your food or meals, it's always hard. You have to grab for like the turkey jerky that has like 200 milligrams of sodium or whatnot. But yeah, it plays a huge role. And if you change the way you eat and keep your workout the same, you'll see crazy results.
Huge results.
People always say, there's like a saying, nutrition's 90% of it. I don't agree with that. Like, I think it depends on what your goal is, right? But if you're looking to physique build and have a great athletic body, the performance piece is key. You have to do it. But the fuel is like what helps you get there, you know?
And you mentioned you're on Whoop now. Like, what have you gotten out of the product?
Yeah, for me, it's mostly tracking my heart rate while I'm doing cardio, because that was always like I would try to hold on to the bars of the
Yeah, right.
woodway and like, you know, step off the treadmill during recoveries and make sure I wasn't going over like 160, 165. So that's been like, I think, the best part of it. I also love tracking sleep and figuring out like, because I think it's always a surprise to learn. Like, there are just some nights where you think you sleep for like 9 hours, and then
Right.
you look at your data and you're like, oh wow, I actually didn't have a good night's sleep, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa. So that's always fascinating, I
It is
think,
kind
for
of the
me.
black box of
Yeah,
everyone's lives.
yeah,
Well, this has been terrific, Joey. I mean, I'm very excited for you and your career and what you've built, and congratulations. And
for sure.
at Whoop, we're thrilled to be partners with you all at Barry's.
We are as well. Thank you so much, and congrats on everything.
Big thank you to Joey for coming on the Whoop podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating or review. Please subscribe to the Whoop podcast. You can learn more about Whoop at whoop.com. Sign up for a free trial. Start measuring your sleep and strain and recovery and everything else. You can find us on social at Whoop, at Will Ahmed. If you got a question for the podcast, email us podcast@whoop.com. And that's it, folks. We'll catch you next week on the Whoop podcast. Stay healthy, stay in the green.